What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina Conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Rania Hanna. We are talking about the Jinn Daughter. That book is available now. I really enjoyed talking with Rania. Such an enjoyable conversation. She was just lovely to talk to. It was really generous and authentic and patient also with me in the conversation. And also towards the end, she asked me for some recommendations on thrillers. So I'm always so excited to when authors ask me about the stuff that I'm reading that I recommend. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Rania Hanna. So today we've got Rania Hanna. We are talking about the Jinn Daughter. That book is available now. Rania, thank you so much for joining me today. This book is really cool. I did not expect it to hit me emotionally the way it did, and I also, I appreciate like the themes that you snuck in there, and you set the tone where it was eerie and isolated, and the mythology of it, the lyrical vibes. I'm excited to get into it today. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. And it's Hannah, by the way.
Hannah, oh my God, you totally
Oh,
told
no problem.
Rania Hannah, you literally told
Perfect.
me that two
No
seconds ago. We
worries.
went over it. Everybody, Rania Hannah. Okay. The Jinn Daughter. Okay, so before we get started, can you give like a summary of the book so that people can follow along with the conversation if they haven't read it?
Yes, it's about Nadine, who is a storytelling djinn, and she tells the stories of the dead. And she does that with pomegranate seeds that fall in front of her home every morning that she collects. And she eats the seeds, and as she does it, her magic captures the soul's story, which she can then tell. And so that soul can then pass on to the final gate of death. So she's this death's caretaker. She also has a daughter, Leala, who's a teenager. They both live ostracized by society in the woods. So there's a bit of this scarlet letter feel happening just because uh, Nadine's a djinn and society doesn't like djinns. There's some backstory with djinn wars that I don't really get into as much in the story, but the end result is that djinns are ostracized. Yes, so with the djinn wars, I don't really get too much into it, but the end result is that the djinns are ostracized by society. With Nadine, though, her magic is death, and she's necessary for the society that she lives in. So they keep her around, but she lives in the woods with her daughter. Her daughter Leala is half Jinn. Nadine's very concerned about her having magic because she wants her safe and protected from society, and she doesn't want her to have magic. Leala is a teenager. She's starting to get into this phase of being a little rebellious and wanting to prove herself to the world. And she also has a touch of magic to her. Then you have the death goddess Gamuna comes in and she demands that Leala take over for her as the new ruler of death, which of course Nadine doesn't want. And so there's a lot of tension between the two to keep Leala safe, as well as a lot of tension going on with other characters throughout the book.
Yeah, in a nutshell, right? I We're gonna get into all of that because just with the mother-daughter dynamic, and I sympathize with both because I'm a mom of two little boys, so and they're 6 and 3, but it's very different from Layala, who's straight up or she is a teenager, but she is in
Mhm.
that I don't know, she's technically an adolescent, but she's like at the cusp, and so she's at that point where she's approaching that untouchable. I'm gonna do what I want. Mommy, like,
Exactly.
mom, come on, listen to me. And I definitely sympathize with both of them because as a mom, but I was once a 14-year-old girl. So I'm
Mhm.
like,
Exactly.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, we'll get into that. First, I want to go into your background, either personal, professional, like kind of the influences and how did you bring the Jinn Daughter to the world?
Yeah, so a lot of the novel is based on Middle Eastern mythology. I'm Syrian American, my parents are immigrants, and I grew up with a lot of oral storytelling. So my
You're
dad,
first generation in America?
I am,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up with a lot of oral storytelling. So my dad told me a lot of stories growing up. He didn't read to me, he told me stories. So there's a lot of that influence in the book. And so in the book itself, there's the wider frame narrative, but within are those smaller stories that are interwoven, similar to A Thousand One Nights, how there are all those little stories into the larger story. So a lot of my background, my culture, my heritage, that tradition of strong oral storytelling. Yeah, so a lot of my cultural background, the Syrian tradition of oral storytelling really focuses in the novel because that's what I drew from. So a lot of the smaller stories are either reminiscent of stories that my dad told me growing up or are directly taken from those stories. So, like The Lion and the Red Jewel, I think that's in there at some point where it was drawn directly from a story my dad told me growing up. The King of Gamblers, a story my dad told me growing up. And a lot of the other stories I made up, but they were taken from like core stories that I somehow read at some point in my life or heard, or just took like ideas from different things.
So, just hopping off of that with I think that it's so cool that you had an in-house storyteller, because like, I love yeah, obviously, I love reading, and but hearing it orally and as, like, a ritual is so different. Because then it's you're depending on the storyteller, right? Like, how
Mhm.
well they can tell the story. So, I imagine your dad was, like, a fantastic storyteller.
Yeah,
So, where
he
he can
was.
get you,
Sound
like
effects, everything.
yeah, I love that, where he could get you in it and you could picture yourself and he's got you on the edge of your seat. I love that because then it's that's how he's delivering it versus, like, when you're reading it,
Mhm,
it's whatever you come up with in your brain, but I think, like, storytellers are just, like, you gotta have that special delivery, you gotta have that special skill to really grab the audience and keep them engaged, and I love that you have an in-house and then
mhm.
that carried you, obviously, where you wanted to tell stories, it seems.
And also Syrian culture tradition is heavily influenced by its oral storytelling, like in Damascus, which is already like the oldest inhabited city in the world or capital city in the world. There's one of the oldest coffee houses there, still have the Hakawati, the oral storytellers, come in and tell stories, and that's what they do for entertainment. So there's a strong history as well in the culture and the tradition within my heritage. It's Middle Eastern heritage in general, but I'm
Oh,
coming
okay.
at it more like Syrian specific because that's
Yeah.
my
I know. I wanna make sure I understand it because I don't wanna, like, overgeneralize, but
yeah.
yeah. Because obviously, I'm, like, a little bit unfamiliar with this, with
Mhm,
the mythology, a part of it, and, like, the culture, but really enjoyed this book. I don't know if that helped me enjoy it more, get into your building going in with a blank slate versus going in with
mhm,
being familiar with it and being like, "Okay, what did she do with it?" kinda thing.
mhm,
So, no, I think that's so fun and that's so cool that that kind of storytelling is passed on and that you were able to carry on with that, and you got a little bit of your father's little bit of his legacy in your story too. I think that's
mhm.
so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. So this is your debut, correct?
it is, yes.
That's so exciting.
Hey,
Congrats.
thank you.
Can you talk about your experience and like big lessons learned, stuff like that?
It's been a long journey. I would say a big lesson is this takes so much patience. I started writing this book in 2019, I think it was before COVID, and 5 years later before it's out. So it's been a
Yeah.
long process. I think finding an agent and then finding a publisher took up most of that time, more than the actual writing. So
Mhm.
there's a lot I learned where there's a lot that's not really even in your control because you can't control the market, you can't control what someone's going to take out of your story, you can't really control what they're looking for. So it's again just a lesson of patience and persistence really is the biggest takeaway from this. But mostly, I think what I really learned is that I have a lot of support, like I have a lot of community where I didn't really
Mhm.
expect people to be quite as excited for it, except maybe like family. But I had people like friends in middle school who are buying my book and telling everybody about it on social media. And I wasn't expecting that community. And it's there. People I haven't seen for 15 years are supporting me and buying my book and telling everybody and telling their mother and like telling their friends and tagging everybody. So it's been really great seeing that support.
Oh, that's so fun. That's awesome. Yeah. I bet they're just, oh shit, like she's doing it. And I think that who knows, I don't know, maybe some parents are like, "What? She's publishing a book. What are you doing?"
I don't think so. I think they're just very excited for the story and they're all readers. So I think they're just excited
Oh, good. Yeah,
reading a book
maybe they're excited to see something from that they're familiar with, right?
or somebody that they know. I think that's really what it is.
Yeah. No, it is exciting. It is exciting, I'll tell you, because I have a friend who that was her goal this past year or in 2023 was she's I'm gonna be published by the end of the year. And she did it
Good for
indie. She
her.
did indie publishing,
Okay.
but she did it. She made it happen, and she had a whole trilogy like mapped out and written. It was just a matter of her like getting it out there. And
Mhm.
then she's also got like some side stories, like a side, I don't know what you want to call it, spinoff and its own
Oh, okay,
trilogy that she's working on too. So it's indie publishing versus like traditional publishing. It's all got its different like challenges and processes. And
yeah. Mhm.
so no, you're not alone in the fact that it took you a while to
Yeah.
secure that confirmed like deal, right? Like
Mhm.
it's because I the authors that I talk to, they'll have a story written and then it takes them 10 years.
Yeah.
Part of that is I'm just sitting on it, but then, yeah, it'll take 10 years for them to be like, "No, I wrote this book 10 years ago and now it's
Mhm.
releasing."
Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
so it's yeah, you're not alone, and then plus COVID was just like, I don't know, it
Yeah.
just business is not usual. It
Yeah.
just
Agreed.
it was really fun. It's really funny to talk to like authors who they wrote their books during COVID.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's the reason that they give. "Oh, how did this story come to the world? What made you like get started on it, blah blah blah." Like whatever they want to talk about, they're like, "Yeah, COVID."
Exactly. You're stuck inside, so you might as well write.
Yeah, if you don't learn to make bread from scratch, it's like you just write a
Exactly.
book.
Yep.
Exactly, yeah. So how okay, so I know you're Miss Smarty Pants, you're a doctoral candidate, yes?
Student, doctoral student. I'm in my 3rd year. I don't it's not officially that I'm a candidate, it's a process, but technically I'm a
Yeah.
doctoral student.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
No, you're on your way.
Yeah, I'm halfway there.
Yeah, I no, I'm so happy and excited that when I could talk to like authors who are like, no, like I'm still doing this and I'm also achieving this great feat. I love that you're a doctoral student, but then you're also like, oh, I'm releasing a book.
Yeah,
Because
I'm
I
working.
think it's such a fascinating part of the author. So can you talk about like how your studies and how your process like influenced how you approached this new project? Maybe something that because maybe you have some control in academic life and you can like
Mhm.
plan and shit. You can plan and see how it goes,
Yeah.
how it works out. But then with the whole publishing process, it's a whole new ball game. So can you did anything like anything that you have experienced prepare you for the publishing process, things like that?
Somewhat, but not quite. They're rather separate for me. I would say they're founded in similar ways of thinking. So when I do my research, it's obviously very methodical. As you say, you have to plan, you have to think through everything. There's a lot you don't control. You can't control what your cells do or your tissue does sometimes, or a lot of the
Mm.
time. So there's a lot of this element of my cell work didn't work out. What do I do? What happened? I don't know. And I feel like that's what it is for me with writing because I am a discovery writer. So I actually don't plan out what I'm going to write. I just sit and
Are
write
you like
and
a pantser or
I am, yeah.
I think that's what they call it, pantser.
Yeah, I've seen discovery writer, around, so I that word more, so
Yeah.
I say discovery writer, but, yeah, there's this element of discovery in writing for me, and same as research, so I say they're different, but there's, like, a core similarity between the 2. There's a lot of discovery work, a lot of creativity that goes into it, and a lot of troubleshooting that ultimately, I think, cross over between the 2.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. I just think it because I've talked to authors who their professional careers were like they've done journalism or
Mhm.
they are college professors. And so I just think it's so fascinating how they transfer those skills or adapt those skills into writing a book where like you can write like such a fascinating book where it's gonna not check all the boxes, but where it's gonna grab the readers and where it's a good story and your style of writing, it's just gonna keep them going. Because that's how I felt about the Jinn Daughter. It was like it was a little slow paced, but like I felt like that was just the vibe of the story
Mhm.
where it was like you're just following this mother, this Jinn, this ostracized, isolated person who with a daughter who's also like they we're gonna try to be spoiler free, but like they're visited by sorry if I didn't pronounce that right.
Elias, Elias.
Elias, yeah, they're visited by her husband and Layala's father, and so it's when I first started getting into that, I was like, what, like, why is he not there? And then it was like you
Mhm,
feed in the details. And that was
mhm,
like, so yeah, it takes the craft and it takes you like really thinking about it. And that's why it's like when I talk to authors, it's no, take the time that you need to like get it right. Because when I was like reading it, like I felt the vibe and I felt the eerie environment, like the setting, because it was like Nadine and Layala, they're isolated.
mhm.
And partially that's partially why obviously it's ironic because the Sheik is the person who
Yes.
isolated it. Yeah. Oh, how you did I pronounce something wrong again?
No, no, I'm saying I was acknowledging, like, yes, like, that's
Yeah,
exactly what's
yeah,
happening,
yeah.
yeah.
So he caused a lot of the boundaries or whatever,
Mhm.
and it happens to be her father-in-law. It
Right,
happens to be
exactly.
Layala's, yeah, like, grandfather. She's gotta deal with that because she doesn't have her husband as the buffer, and then not only that, but he blames her, understandably, unfortunately, he blames her, and then Layala, she's, like, pure rebel teenage fashion. She feels that isolation, and
Yes.
I'm just gonna go see oh god, what do they call it? Not Baba, right? Because Baba's dad.
Jiddo. Jiddo for
Yeah,
grandfather.
Jido.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then she's, "Oh, sure," but then she, like, plays it off. Nadine sends her feelers out, and then
Yeah,
so there's
exactly.
a little yeah. So there's just so much going on where it's like the slow pace, I feel like maybe it's a little bit slower. It feels okay. It feels fine.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I totally appreciated that. No, don't take my criticism. I'm just
Oh,
like
no, you're totally fine.
Yeah, no, I love the Jinn Daughter. So yeah, I think it's so interesting. But I was saying because sometimes if the pace is too slow, I'm like, oh God, okay. But like you did it in such a way where like your writing style, it was like it flowed and even breaking it up between timeline and then the stories that she's telling or the stories that she's experiencing, it still all flowed very well where I was like, yeah, I want to know what's going on. What's going on with this? What's going on with this Jin boy? What's going on with her father-in-law? Like he's so angry, but he loves his granddaughter. It's like why is her husband dead? What's okay, death's coming and she's absolutely not. It's like you found a way to just plant everything and keep it going. And it's obviously how what you said or what you touched on earlier is that you didn't go much into the Jin Wars, but you just left me wanting more. I was like, I want
That's
more. I
good.
want the Jin
That's
I want
great.
the Jin Wars. I want the goddesses. I want like more. Give me more.
That's good, I did my
So
job. Thank you.
yeah, exactly, exactly, but I'm totally satisfied with this story as is, and then I was really happy with the outcome. Yeah, so hopping off of that, you said earlier it was like Middle Eastern mythology and your father's storytelling, which I so wholesome. I feel like I would have loved to just be in that room, be part of your slumber parties, whatever. So, was there any additional research involved? Did you have to like refresh your memory? Did you have to dig a little bit deeper outside of your brain, things like that?
No, I very intentionally did not do much research because I didn't want to plagiarize any of the stories. So I didn't even
Oh,
ask
okay.
for verification for anything. I just, whatever I remembered from the dredges of my childhood, I pulled out into the stories. And I did want to make them somewhat my own. So I very intentionally did not read anything to prepare. I started reading a couple books like Syrian folktales or like some Persian ones, but it was just very minimal and again very intentional about that because I wanted to pull together different elements into different stories within and not again not plagiarize, and I really wanted to make the stories my own and not just retell them necessarily. There's an element of that in there, but I mostly just wanted to either make up my own stories because it's fun. It's really fun to, as I'm writing the story and I want to get to a smaller one and I'm thinking, what could I write about? Oh, I'm looking at a tree outside. Maybe I'll write about a tree. Like it was very flowy and very, I don't want to say whimsical. It wasn't that. It was just very creative for me, and I wanted to be intentional about that.
Yeah, and it worked out for sure because I totally get that where you're like how much do I want to borrow or should I not borrow at all?
Yeah,
When you're just like, you know what, in order to make this story how I want and be comfortable with it and because otherwise that's just going to add another layer of anxiety. I
yeah.
feel
And I
like.
was really anxious. There's that story about the pearl tree that I am so convinced I got from somewhere. honest to God, I really wasn't sure if I pulled from another story with this idea of the pearl tree, because I was so sure I remember reading about a pearl tree when I was younger. And I was Googling, I was doing all of this research to try to find this story, and I honestly couldn't. So I don't know if it's this really old folk tale where it's either Persian or Middle Eastern or something, but again, very intentional to not look up anything so that I could just make the story my own.
So you didn't even ask your dad, like, "Hey, do you remember this story or do you remember that
Yeah, he's not.
story?" You didn't
I
even.
don't think he told me it. I think it was something I'd read, but I couldn't
Yeah.
find anything, so I might be even making that up, and maybe I didn't read it anywhere. I honestly didn't know. So,
You're like,
yeah,
"I might be making the source up, I don't even know."
I have no idea, really. Couldn't remember.
I love that, that's awesome. That's so funny. We were like you were even trying to be strategic about that.
I was. I really couldn't know.
That's awesome. So, like, we're talking about, like, mother-daughter relationships and parent-child relationships, obviously, are, like, heavy like, one of the heavy themes in the book, and so it's like you got Nadine and Layala, where Nadine is I don't know, she's, like, on the verge of, like, helicopter parent, and then Layala's, "No, mom, like, I want a bigger life," but then you go to Kamuna, and I'm so sorry if I butchered her
Hail,
name. You're a gem for being so patient with me. And then that relationship where she kind the death at Kamuna, she just accepted it, and she's,
mhm,
like, just hanging out, and she's still holding on, even maybe that's, like, her type of acceptance, where she's holding on and she's not, like, completing that last step to into the beyond. So I want to explore that, like the relationships and how you establish them and how the parallels and maybe how your own experiences. I don't know if you have any kids. Like, how'd you get in the mindset of that?
yeah, I do not have kids. I have a mother. I'm an only child, so I spent a lot of time with my parents. So a
Yeah.
lot of the relationship building in the story really just comes out of my maturity of my relationships with my own parents through the ages. So, my parents, in quite typical immigrant parent fashion, were very strict growing up. They had really high expectations. There were cultural differences between what they expected for me and what I expected because of being in this country and growing up here. So, the aspects of Nadine really wanting to take care of her child and protect her really comes from my relationship with my parents and how they were with me and being very loving, very supportive, and very protective. With Kamuna, it's more like you said, she accepted the situation where she lives in death. She lives in the realm of death. So for her, death is everything and everywhere. So the fact that her child is dead is just not really something she can really fight against in her perspective because she's been dead for so long that she's in the later stages of grief where she's, as you say, accepted it. Nadine is never going to accept the fact that her child could die, and she doesn't want that for her. She wants more for her. So, those different dynamics I had to keep in mind. But again, they come from my relationship with my parents and just growing up and having that relationship with them mature over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so I'm not a first generation, but I'm half Mexican, half Irish. I got like my both of my parents' families have been here for a minute because it's really funny. Like my mom's side of the family, her mother's side, they were here since before Texas became Texas. So it was a very
Wow.
different
Okay.
experience where they were like generations ago, they were
Mhm.
the border crossed them. So I always get so interested in like first generation or even just people who were brought over here as children. And
Mhm.
that totally shapes their like worldview and it totally shapes their upbringing because their parents are like, oh my God, we gotta be careful. We don't know this place. We gotta be careful of people. We don't know. We wanna be like we wanna be in the background, right? We don't wanna ruffle
Mhm.
any feathers. We wanna be upstanding citizens. We don't want anybody looking our way. But then the children, you're like just American kids. Like,
Exactly.
and you guys are just like, what? It's fine. Like, it's no big deal. I always find that dynamic like so fascinating and so
Mhm.
interesting. And I'm totally sympathetic to it. I could totally tell during the Jinn Daughter, you poured those experiences in where you felt like because Nadine was like doing everything she could.
Yeah.
She was doing everything. She would stop at nothing. She was, like,
Exactly.
manipulating people. She was using her magic. She was keeping tabs. She was, like, trying her best to make sure and trying to push against the destiny that she did not want to admit. And that kinda just, like, adds it's just like the layer, like the basic layer where it's just her daughter has magic, she doesn't want that for her, and, like, how where could you go with that? So I think
Mhm.
that's parallel to a lot of first generation kids' experiences where it's like the parents are like, "You are ex they have you guys have the gift of experiencing this country from birth," and
Exactly.
they're not like, the parents aren't familiar with that, they don't know what to expect, and so it's just a lot of understanding. It's like a lot of, like, grace, it's a lot of understanding, it's a lot of adjustment where the parents have to be like, "No, let my kid assimilate, she's gotta be a
Mhm.
kid, she's gotta be rebellious, we gotta let her do her thing," even though I'm like, "Oh, hell no."
Exactly.
And then it's like the kid, for you, for example, you're like, "What? This isn't a big deal. What are you talking about? It's just can I
You've
just
got
go hang out
spot
with my fr"
on. Yep. You've got it
Yeah.
spot on. You're right. It's third culture kid is a total thing. It's a thing. It's a real thing.
Mhm. And I don't know, I just think it's so interesting and so powerful because you as a first generation, you almost have the upper hand in certain aspects because you are more familiar and more knowledgeable and you have there's some things are more intuitive to you
Mhm.
versus your parents who are just like learning and then they're learning together and then now all of a sudden you come along and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh shit."
Exactly it, yeah. And even, like, small things that aren't actually small, like negotiating at a job for your salary. For me, of course,
Yeah.
I would negotiate, why wouldn't I? Whereas my parents are more, "No, just be grateful for what you're getting. You have a good job. You have what you need. It's okay. Don't ask for more. They can rescind your offer." And there's a lot of fear that comes from being an immigrant, whereas with me, I think, no, it's dumb to leave money on the table. You're looking at it incorrectly.
Yeah.
It's
You
like
also
totally different perspectives.
Oh, absolutely, because 'cause they're like, "No." Yeah, it's also they're like, "No, just take what they give you," but you're
Yeah.
like, but then you're not only looking at your, like, American-born peers, but you're looking at also your fellow foreign-born peers, and I bet I'm sorry, I'm, like, in my mid to late 30s, so I'm
Mhm.
very different.
Oh,
Like,
okay,
I'm
easy.
very established in my career, so it's but even so, yeah, it's you learn that if talking about, like, negotiation and trying to, like, just have advocacy for yourself. You're also looking at your peers and being like, "What are they doing?" Because 'Cause you're like, if I request something lower, but what are my peers doing? Even people who are who are first generation or who are not from here,
Mhm.
who have, like, maybe non-American last names. Like, who are the people who are in your same boat? What are they doing? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's okay, if they're not downplaying or underselling themselves, why should I, right?
Exactly it, yep.
Yeah, no,
You've got it spot on. For not being a first gen, like, you definitely get it.
I know, right? Yeah, I don't know, I think I just try to open my mind to I think reading helps.
Oh, absolutely.
Being a bookworm, but I think it's just the interest I have in, like, people who I just get fascinating from people who, like, their life stories, people who
Mhm.
come here, and then also, authors who they end up being authors, or they're, like even if it's just, like, nonfiction, if they're doing a memoir
Mhm.
or if they're doing historical fiction. I've discovered I'm a sucker for historical fiction where they create a story out of something real that happened, and I'm like, "No, I this makes me feel smarter, plus I'm entertained." So I just
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I loved Oh, by the way, I love the cover. How did that
Huh.
go for you?
I didn't really have much of a choice.
Okay.
Publisher chose it. I did give guidelines of there was an Instagram account that I really loved her artwork, and it was that dark botanical feel, and so I just shared that with my publisher and said, "Look, this is what I'm envisioning for my cover. Can
Yeah.
we make it happen?" And they did. So they found some artwork, they worked with a designer, and they envisioned it for me. So it worked out. People have been loving the cover.
Yeah. So then when they presented the cover, you were like, "Oh,
Yeah, it fit what I was looking for with that dark background with the vibrant colors and so forth. So they took my vision and they made it happen.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I ask when there's, like, beautiful covers, I ask, "Oh, how did that happen?" Because some authors are like, "Oh, they listened to me, like, everything I said, they did."
Mhm.
And then there's other authors who are like, "You know what? They didn't give me anything, but then when I saw the cover, I fell in love." So I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's so cool. You don't wanna, like, step on any toes of people
Mhm.
who are experienced, right? Who know what they're doing, because you gotta compete a little bit for people who are also releasing their works on the same day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you just wanna make sure that you wanna trust the process, but then you also gotta, "What am I allowed to say?"
Yeah. It worked out.
That's great. No, that's awesome because I remember I saw the cover and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I, like, read the synopsis and I was like, "Oh." And then I read the book and I was like, "Ooh, okay." I felt I had to get myself in a little cozy corner and get myself in the mindset of some eerie shit and some, like, fantastical shit. It's like, 'cause I there was a point where I was like, I love Nadine, I totally relate to her, but there was a point where I was like, "Girl, like, you gotta let it go, like, all the odds are against you. You can't
Mhm.
escape fate." And then even so, her daughter's mom, "I want a higher purpose. I want more." And it was, like, so heartbreaking because I could, like I said, like, I was once a 14-year-old girl, but I'm also a mom, so I felt both sides of that coin. I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, Nadine, sorry, let her go." But then I was like, "Yala, let her down a little bit easier."
Yeah. Yeah. Nadine is also very stubborn, in case you didn't
Yeah.
notice.
Oh, no, she did not wanna listen to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. She knows her own mind. She knows what she wants. Whether it's right or wrong, that's not the point. Is she knows what she wants and she will go for it. And I really wanted that for her. I when I started learning about her character more, I realized she is very stubborn. And as you say, like she will stop at nothing to get what she wants. And regardless of what's going on, it's just she knows what she wants. She thinks she's best. She knows best. Like mother knows best. And that's her character, and she does what she wants to do in the way she does it lovingly. She's everything she does is for Leala and her protection.
I So, as a mom, I'm, like, thinking, "Okay, if my child was, like, requested and destined for something that I absolutely that was my worst nightmare," right? I would probably react the same way as Nadine. I would probably be,
Mhm.
like, freaking out and be like, but I don't know, I feel like maybe I would give up a little bit sooner. I think I would feel like, "Oh, if it's really the odds are against me and this is really what she's meant to do and is what she wants to do."
Mhm.
She's very open to this role because she wants something more. That's where it was more heartbreaking for Nadine too, because Leala was like, "Mom, I want to do something." She was like, "I
Mhm.
want something more." And she was fine. She was fine. I don't know if she cared about dying, but she was fine with whatever it took to a higher purpose. And that's like so admirable. She was like, "I want a higher purpose." Cause I'm like thinking, okay, like not a lot of people in general, not a lot of characters are like that headstrong about it, where they're like,
Yeah.
"Mom, I want something more." And
Yeah.
then Nadine was like, "No, you don't." Like, no, no. Even from a toddler where she was like, no. So
But
I
like,
think, yeah,
yeah,
the
go ahead.
mother-daughter dynamic, yeah.
Yeah, but Leela's also only like 14. So his perspective, it's like you're far too young to be making a decision where you are giving up a lot. You're giving up your life. You should not
Yeah.
be making this decision at the age of 14 when you're feeling all these things that you're confused by. So I feel like Nadine, I'm actually more sympathetic to Nadine because I feel like she's approaching it from this perspective of experience that Leila doesn't remember. Leila never even went into death. She was never even in the realm, so she didn't know what it was like, and she's ready to just give up her life for this thing that she knows nothing about, that Nadine has known her whole life.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
this element of I'm the mother, like I have experience in this thing that you don't. So you should probably listen to me. And I think part of the story is really tapping into the wisdom of elders. And I was trying to tap into that a little bit more, where when you're young, it's you have your own wisdom, yes, but you also have your elders who have far more wisdom that you don't.
And then even as when you're young, it's so hard to, like, because 'cause you're like, "Oh, they don't know what I'm going through."
Yeah, exactly. I
But
don't
it's like when
understand.
they're the elders are like, "Child."
I've been through this and more.
Yeah, I know, and that's what I, like, worried about. I mean, I don't have a girl. If I have a 3rd, I'm hoping it's a girl. Because if I would have 3 boys, I'd just accept defeat. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, my boys are 3 and 6, and even then, I'm like, the 6-year-old, he's coming up with some worthwhile questions and statements where I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I always say this as an example, but I feel like he was like, "Oh, mom, what does sarcastic mean?" And I was like,
How does he know this word?
I think it was because I used it. I was like, "Daddy's
Ah,
just being sarcastic." And then he was like, "What does sarcastic mean?" I was like, "Fuck." Like,
yeah.
how do I explain sarcastic? And then I was like, I think it's when you mean something, but you say something else because you're trying
Mhm.
to make a point. And even then,
Yeah.
it's they don't
There's no reference for
so
them. Yeah.
exactly, unless they have some social, like, cues or
Mhm.
context for that, and then they get it. But then yeah, so that's why I think yeah, I definitely sympathize with Nadine, but then it was like, from a 14-year-old standpoint, I was like, "Yes, girl, fight for your shit."
Yeah.
And it was like Nadine, she raised 'cause Layla was getting picked on.
Yeah.
She was getting picked on, and she was a little bit of an outsider, and Nadine was like, "No, I don't blame her for throwing rocks at those boys or whatever." I don't blame her for standing up for herself, and then now she's, like, reaping what she sows
Yeah.
because she's mom, no, and then Nadine's fuck, you know?
Yeah. Exactly. Yep.
So, I think that was so powerful, and it's at the layer of the
Mhm.
story of just her figuring out how to keep the normal world as is
Yeah.
without her being the fault, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'll always give you credit for setting that tone because as soon as I read and, like, I read the 1st chapter, I was like, "Ooh, and
I'm
this
glad.
is gonna
Thank
be
you.
there's gonna be a creepy
Good.
little what's gonna happen." I was like and then it got into the family bit, and then it got to her, like, the history bit, and then I was like, "Oh, Nadine, fuck everyone." It's like
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty much her personality, yeah, for most of it.
I love that. I love that because she was like, "Absolutely not."
Yeah.
No matter what happened, she was like, "Absolutely not." And I love that, and I love that you were like, I'm just gonna creep that in there. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna creep that attitude in
Yeah.
there." Just anybody wants to bring it up to me, come on. No, I love it when writers are like, "Nah, fuck it."
It's more like Nadine was that personality more than anything, and I just ran with it as she
Yeah,
developed.
like, she grew on you without you
She
realizing it.
did. She became her own person. I was just her conduit, really. I just did what she told me, and I'm fine with it. The story was actually going to be more from Layala's perspective, actually, initially, and Nadine just stole the show, so I let her.
There you go.
Yep.
I think that was a good choice. You can also, if you want, also release a book with Nate Ayala's point of view, or continuing her story after the events of the Jinn Daughter.
That is what I've been thinking about, a sequel that is
Yeah,
based on Nayala and Sale in Death. We'll see, we'll
you
see.
should do it. Or at least
Maybe.
have it written and ready.
I will.
I know it's as a reader, I'm just like, just do it.
Just do it. Just give me,
Just do
like,
it.
3 years to do it, but yeah.
Yep. Yep. Okay. What were the most you touched on this a little bit. What were the most challenging parts to write, and then what were the most enjoyable parts to write?
I think the challenging parts were the scenes with Sheikh Hamadi, the grandfather, because I needed a villain, and he was the villain. But I wanted to make sure he had a touch of humanity to him that wasn't just him being the antagonist, which is why I really focused on his love for Leanna. That's his redeeming quality. And so it was really challenging to showcase he just hates Nadine so much. But even as he's hating her, as much as he hates her, he loves his granddaughter. And so it was difficult to kind of balance that hatred with that love and try to make it come through. It wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. So that was a challenge. And also, same with Rami, with trying to make him,
Oh, Rami, the Jin boy?
yeah, like
I couldn't
somewhat
remember his
right.
name. I was like, "The Jin boy." I was like
Rami,
I
yeah.
couldn't remember him. Okay, yes, continue, sorry.
Yeah. Just again, making him not just the antagonist and having a little more backstory to him was a bit of a challenge, especially like bringing in Mother Earth and the relationship there and having her have some sort of role that wasn't just going to do an earthquake or something. I don't know. Like it was a little bit more than that. So I would say those were the challenges, but I really enjoyed writing the smaller stories. I loved writing the folk tales. I loved like veering away from the main story and just feeling creative and whimsical and just writing that fairy tale story that it was really fun to sit there and be a little more creative and think about the different stories I could bring in that provide a lesson without it necessarily being this overt lesson. And I love doing that. I was having so much fun writing those stories.
That's awesome. If you want, like, an additional outlet, I could tell that you were, like you could just take your father's stories and be like, "Okay, hold on, I'll be back," and then just, like,
Yeah.
roll.
Yeah.
You could just do that as, like, short stories, just tuck away for later until you, like, have like, you can continue the Jinn
Mhm.
Daughter and just be with those little novellas, and then
Yeah.
I know, I love that. I love that. I love that you were like,
Yeah. Yeah. They were fun though. They were fun to write.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just a few more questions before we wrap up. Thank you so much for being so patient. Okay, what do you hope readers get out of The Jinn Daughter?
I hope a couple things. So one is part of the story is about grief and acceptance. So I hope they get this sense of excuse me, of acceptance, of recognizing that some things are in your power and some things are not, which is a lesson that I always need to remind myself. So that's one thing. And another thing too is this idea of because Arabic is woven into the story as individual words. And so I really hope readers get the sense that there's so much more about Arab culture that isn't just what on the media, right? We have such a rich, powerful history, heritage in literature, in poetry, in the arts, in the sciences. Like we're so much more than the villain in a movie. And I really hope that people feel that and recognize that we have such rich stories. We're not just Aladdin genie. We're so much more than that. We have so much to us. And I hope people appreciate the language in there and recognize that it is such a beautiful language. To me, it's a very musical and deep, rich, colorful language. And I hope readers feel that when they're reading.
I'm all about that. I'm all about promoting that message. Be like, "Hey, if you need you should read something different and you should get a little insight into a culture that you're not used to."
Yeah.
I will be the first advocate for that. And it's so funny because I'm like, I read all these books and it's like I get to interview all you magnificent people. And I'm like, people ask me for interview or no, people ask me for book recommendations. I'm like, okay, what are you looking for? If you want to look for like multicultural shit, I got you. If you're
Yeah.
looking for fantasy, I got you. If you're looking for thriller, I got you. But it was like I find because I get it's not just all one genre that I get.
Mhm.
So I learn more about myself, but I'm also like, oh my god, I'm so glad I got the opportunity to read this
Mhm.
book because it's I I have no familiarity with Middle Eastern mythology.
Yeah.
But then I got this little taste of it and I'm like, I really enjoyed it. And so it was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah, no, you did a really good job, not just like pulling a little bit, but also like delivery. And it takes a
Good.
lot. And I know, oh, and I did kind of backtrack on your Instagram a little bit. And I saw like your little post about, oh, here is Nadine, here is Layala, here is Kamuna, like the little like AI, don't know, it was a
Mhm.
little
Yeah.
artwork.
It was on
Yeah.
Canva. Yeah. Yeah.
Of the characters, and I so enjoyed looking at those because it
Oh,
was
I'm
like, it
glad.
just Help me get to know the characters. Okay, what advice do you have for Nadine? What advice do you have for Layala?
I think they both need to listen to each other more. I think ultimately it comes down to both taking the time to really understand each other a little bit more and not just like reacting out of certain emotions. Like Nadine's acting out of fear, Nayala's acting out of, I think, her own sets of fears as well. And I think they both need to pay more attention to that and try to work with each other a little bit more.
Yeah, I think definitely there wouldn't be a story if they
Exactly.
understood each other, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, obviously they should understanding each other would make their lives go a lot more smoothly,
Yes, it
but
would.
yeah, then there wouldn't be a story. No, I'm right there with you. So what is next for you, Rania Hanna?
Mhm.
What are you working on anything that you could talk about?
Yes, I am working on. I finished the manuscript, a couple edits as well. So it's actually with my agent. She hasn't read it yet, but it is a like Arabian star folklore. So very similar to Jinn Daughter in the structure of the frame narrative with smaller stories interwoven and that same lyrical writing. But it's more based on like Arabian star folklore. So when you think of constellations, you think of Greek and Roman stories. We have stories too. And in fact, we are probably the origin of some of these stories. I say we as in Arabs. And so I wrote a story with a lot of the star folklore kind of woven into this larger frame narrative of this daughter who lives alone with her father in the woods. So very similar to Nadine and Dayana. They're not ostracized. This is more of their choice to stay away from society for various reasons. But her father used to serve a god of death who is very cruel and very greedy and selfish. And so he is called upon by the god of death to do certain tasks for him that he has no choice but to do. And so this daughter, this Amr, her name is Amr, which means moon in Arabic, she has to go save her father from this god of death. And of course, she goes on this journey through the desert and meets different supernatural beings along the way and learns a lot about herself as she does that. So, mostly similar, but focus on star folklore.
I love it. I love it. You're still working on that, so no release date or
No, but
anything.
I can maybe
No, that's fine.
draw
That's
some
fine. We
excerpts
gotta
and
leave everybody
Instagram.
to keep guessing.
Yeah, I think there's actually an excerpt on Instagram somewhere. If you dig into it, you'll find it.
So, well, do you have a newsletter where you give little sneak peeks?
I should have a newsletter. I have a blog, Reading Between the Dunes. It's my WordPress. I use that essentially as my author newsletter. So I can drop something there if you want to go follow
Yeah.
me.
So, The Jinn Daughter by Rania Hanna. I recommend it for people who are looking for that mythological fiction and who are looking for the cultures that maybe they aren't familiar with, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't know what to expect, but when I got into it, it got me in and I felt for the characters and I became invested. "Girl," I was like, "Nadine, be careful." And then I was like, "Kamuna, girl, chill." And then I was and then I was also like, "Layala, girl, go a little bit softer.
Yeah.
Take it down a notch." Because I can understand why she felt so strongly.
Mhm.
It was like less is more. If you're trying to convince your helicopter mom to
Yeah.
Arya, can you chill? Can you just give me like 4 minutes? Do you want to say hi? It's my dog. She's 10 years old and she's got such an attitude. I'm sure you can hear it.
I don't hear anything
I'm gonna close.
actually.
Oh, okay. This microphone is good then. Hold on. Give me a hot second. I'm gonna lock her out. Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry, girl. I'm sorry, girl. I promise it's just a couple more minutes. Just a couple more
Just a
minutes. All
question.
right.
Did you ever read Vampires of El Norte or El Norte? I think you
No.
might like that because it's
Is it similar a little bit of like urban, like a realistic fantasy type thing?
like Spanish Mexican kind of thing. If you're saying your family has that history, yeah, you
Yeah.
might like it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know. my reading list
Ever
depends on a
growing.
lot of what I'm, like, presented with.
Yeah.
I'm reading Throne of Glass because I'm, like,
Oh,
going
okay.
against my process. I'm
Oh, wow,
like
okay.
yeah, so I'm in the middle of the 4th book of that whole series, and
Okay.
it's because I have the physical copies and I then have the audiobooks, so
Oh,
that if I wanna catch up,
yeah.
I could read advanced copies if I got audiobooks, 'cause then I can
Mm.
just listen to it while I'm, like, doing my chores,
Yeah.
putting away dishes, cooking, driving, whatever, but otherwise, I usually just always say yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, even if it's like poetry, memoirs, short stories, fantasy, sci-fi, whatever, I'm like,
Just
yeah.
give it to me.
I'm like, honestly, I can't, I'm a sucker for thrillers because sometimes they just do it so well. And I'm a sucker for historical romance, I found, or historical fiction. I like when I like a little bit of history,
Yeah.
but then I'm also a sucker for romance for a little bit of it. And so I'm like, okay, I see what I favor.
What's your you were saying good thrillers. What are some of your favorites? 'Cause for a good thriller.
Oh, look for anything by Carter Wilson.
Carter Wilson? Okay.
I Carter Wilson, he just released a new book last week called The Father She Went to Find. But I've read a few books by him and it's been very not disappointing,
Okay.
very good.
Alright.
Carter Wilson. So if you like thrillers, he knows what he's doing.
Ah, good to know. Alright.
For sure, and I've interviewed him a few times, and he's just a great he's so friendly, and he's so open, and he also has I think he has his own podcast too, where he
Oh, okay.
interviews other writers and just, like, picking their brains about what's going on, what I don't know. But no, I as far as thrillers, look at Carter Wilson, and I will say Daniel Kraus, but I feel like he's famous, he doesn't need I don't know. So Daniel Kraus, he's worked with George A. Romero on a couple of projects, and he's also, like, very good at thrillers, suspense. I remember I've interviewed him a bunch of times, and I remember interviewing him about he wrote, like, a middle grade book
Oh, okay.
for 11 to 13-year-olds,
Yeah.
whatever, and it was still, like, disturbing.
Do
It
you
was
remember
still
the title?
disturbing and, like, out there, and I interviewed him, I was like, "Dude, where do you get off, like, writing this shit for 12-year-olds?" And he was just like, "If they don't wanna read it, they can put it down." And I was like
I like his attitude.
yeah, I was like, That's a good answer." So I definitely recommend looking up Daniel Kraus because
Okay.
he's talented. He's talented, and he's just so humble, he's down to earth, like, you could just talk to him, and I bet if you reach out to him, and be like, "Hey, what if you wanna reach out to him for what kinda where do you get your shit? Where do you get your headspace? How do you get into the zone?" He's so generous and he's so awesome. I totally would expect him to be like, "Oh, yeah, whatever." So, yeah, Carter Wilson and Daniel Kraus. Women suspense authors, Nicole Lundergan. I interviewed her a few weeks ago.
Okay.
She released her most recent book was A Man Downstairs, and it was fantastic.
Okay.
Nicole Lundergan, A Man Downstairs. I would recommend that to everyone,
Okay.
even if they are not into suspense, they're not into whatever, mystery, murder, whatever. I recommend it because she did it very well
I
and
will order it
great
right now.
storyteller. You better tag me.
I will. Cool.
No, I know, because 'cause I'm like, when people ask me, like, "What are you reading right now?" or "What do you recommend?" I'm like, "Okay, what do you want?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, "No, you're gonna be added to that list." So we, like, want fantasy, world building, a little bit here and there, because I really did you got me sucked in your style where I was, like, invested. I was like, "Nadine, what's
Yeah,
going on?
yeah.
Layala, what's going on? Kamuna, give them a break." I was
Yes,
like
I
and
agree.
then I was like, the Jinn boy, I was like, oh, no, he's innocent," and then I was like,
Mm,
no,
yeah.
mm."
Good, I'm glad that
I
came
love it.
across.
Yeah, exactly, like, I recommend the Jinn Daughter because you did it in such a way to get people invested and get people, like, real life reactions. I
Oh,
love it.
cool.
I love it.
Thank you.
Okay, so Rania Hanna, The Jinn Daughter, that book is available now. Where can we find you online and on social media?
Mostly Instagram at Rania the Writer, Rania underscore. I don't even know if my name has an underscore in it.
I think it's like Rania underscore the
Is that what it is?
underscore
I honestly
writer.
don't know, but yeah, it's Rania the Writer, and
I think
on
so.
my WordPress blog/newsletter, it's reading let me check what let me make sure. Reading Between the Dunes. on WordPress.
Yeah, I'll include links to everything as long as they're all up to date.
They are. Yeah, I will send it to you.
Everybody could find everything in the show links. Yeah. Rania Hanna, thank you so much. You're so patient, and I love the Jinn Daughter. I recommend it for everybody who loves mythological, I don't know, like romance, not romance. There's no romance. It's just like fantasy, but like mythology based. And if you're a mom or if you're a daughter, you should definitely check this out. And thank you so much for your
Yeah.
patience and for your time. I really enjoyed this book, and I'll recommend it for people who like fantasy and for people who like a little bit of humans peppered into that shit.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and it was lovely chatting with you. This is probably my favorite interview. I've had so much fun with this, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. That means so much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Hey, bookworms. That was Rania Hanna talking about the Jinn Daughter. That book is available now. Check out the show notes for links where you can find her online and on social media and where you can purchase the book. And as you're looking on social media using your social accounts, please go ahead and find Cantina Book Club. Give it a like or a follow, subscribe. And please also check out, if you need book recommendations, check out cantinabookclub.com. And if you do find any books that you really enjoy or you like the authors, you like their work, go ahead and hop onto Goodreads and Amazon if you can and give them a rating and a review. It really does help the authors out, as well as pre-orders. So, if you hear a lot of hype about, if you really like the author and you know that they've got something coming out soon, go ahead and pre-order, because it really makes a difference in to how successful their work will be. And also, of course, obviously, if the book's already out, go ahead and order it because that also helps as well. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.